Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I want to give you a little information, do a little video on how I am decluttering and packing up my sewing space. Now, whether you are moving from one house to another like I am, or if you're just moving from one room to another, or you're just wanting to declutter, I think there may be some tips in here that you could use. So I don't have any video of me actually doing the decluttering at this point. This is just kind of an overview, so I want to do that, and then I'll pop up some pictures, kind of explain a little bit more about what I'm doing. Now, when we decided to move, I had already been decluttering the house. That's just something that needed to be done, and I do go through all of my quilting stuff usually once a year. At least the fabric, I will go through and declutter that, because otherwise it just accumulates to the point where it's taken over the whole house. And I've already got quilts that are taking up the whole house, so I don't need the fabric too. So I'm gonna remove my glasses because there's a glare there. But anyway, one of the things that I did just right off the bat was decided not to rush through this. And that just puts a lot of pressure on me, and it doesn't accomplish anything. So if you're doing the same thing, just take the time that you need to do this so that you do it right, and that you don't have any regrets at the end. Also, you may need to do this in a couple of phases, and what I mean is you may have to go through and do a general declutter and then go back and kind of fine-tune it. So go through your things and get rid of things that you know you don't want, and then go through it again and see if there's anything in there that you've kept that you probably won't use, and then take care of that. Another thing is to have some places in mind to donate these items. So whether you want to donate them to a charity or a friend, if they're things that just need to be trashed, have those places in mind and check with them and see what they will take. We have places here, well, like a local quilt guild, you know, they may be able to use some of your blocks, quilt blocks that you've done that you're not going to use anymore, some of your orphan blocks. If you have a UFO project that you're not interested in completing, they may be able to take that and turn it into a charity quilt. Other charities in the area, sometimes nursing homes or retirement centers, they'll have like activity directors who are always looking for materials and things to use, so you might check there. We have a couple of general charities that help low-income families, so they can take some things. So there's one that take a lot of craft items as long as they're packaged, so not a partially used craft item, but they will take those, and they will take books, and so there are places like that that you can use. So search your area and find out what they will take, and what kind of condition they need to be in before they will take them. And then you can, as you're going through all your items, you can separate those into those categories. So in general, you'll have a category where items you want to keep, items you want to donate, and items that you just need to trash. In my case, I'm going to have some hopefully short-term storage, but it may turn into be longer-term storage than what I'd want. So items that may have to go into a storage facility. So I have to think about what items would I be comfortable with putting into a storage facility. Like, I don't want to put my quilts in a storage facility. I want my quilts with me. But things like maybe my fabric stash, fabrics that I'm not using currently, those could go into storage. Some of my extra sewing machines, I have several vintage sewing machines. they're really nice, they're vintage, they're collectible, but they aren't worth a lot of money. So I'm not really concerned about those. Another thing, if you're going to use a storage facility, decide if you need to use one that is climate controlled or not. Now here in Missouri, in the summer, we get extreme heat and extreme humidity. And in the wintertime, we get, cold temperatures down 30s, 20s, teens, that kind of thing. So we have those extremes in weather and temperature and humidity that will affect what I'm storing. The first thing I did after deciding my categories and checking out all of the charities was deciding how I was going to go through my items. So I decided to go through them by category, like my fabric, my UFOs, my finished quilts, and then other categories like my embellishments and other materials. So I'll tell you a little bit about those. So first thing I went through was my fabric stash, and I did that because I was familiar with doing that, because I do it at least once a year anyway. So I went through it again and I pulled out all the fabrics that I didn't like anymore, or I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to use it for. And meaning it wasn't, the size was not something that I could use for like a backing. So if I had a piece of fabric that was a couple of yards, but I'm not sure what I want to use it for, well, a couple of yards can get me a backing for a quilt. So I would hang on to that. I went through all of my scraps because I don't buy fabric usually unless I've got a purpose for it. So I don't have a big fabric stash, but I have a lot of scraps because I save the scraps from each project, and I don't always use them right away. So I went through all of those scraps and pulled out all of the scraps that were too small to make a 2.5-inch square out of. So you decide what is the correct size for you. For me, I don't usually work with anything less than a 2.5-inch square. Sometimes I will, like on these Lori Holt picture projects. She uses 1-inch squares a lot of times, but those projects are already done with. I'm not saving little tiny scraps like that anymore. What I save is 2.5 inches or larger. So anything smaller than that, I put aside, usually just to trash, unless it's something I know a friend might want. But that stuff went in the trash. Anything that was larger that I did not want anymore, that went into my donate pile. I still need to go through my UFOs. Haven't done that yet, but I will go through those. But go through those and see if there's a project in there that you're no longer interested in finishing. Usually my UFOs are quilt tops that I've bought at a flea market or an antique shop, and my intention is to finish those, to get them quilted and bound, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So I want to hang on to those. Some of them are blocks, all those blocks that I've made for the last 2 years in the Stash Buster series, as well as the Vintage Quilt Block series. Some of those in the Vintage Quilt Block series are still just blocks right now, but I do have a purpose for them, so I'm keeping those. The ones that were the Stash Buster blocks, most of them I've already sewn into small quilt tops, and the plan for those was to finish them and then donate the finished quilts to charity. So I still have a purpose for those, so I'm hanging on to those. I have some vintage blocks that I also want to finish into tops, so I'm hanging on to those. So I am not denying myself projects to do, but I am getting rid of things that I no longer have a purpose for. Another thing I went through were things like other materials like interfacing, fusible fleece, fusible web, those kind of things. If I had tiny pieces of the fusibles, the web or the fleece, I would throw those away. The others, I would fold them all up neatly and I put them all together in a drawer. So I have underneath my long arm machine, if you have a long arm machine, especially if you have a gamel. The back side of the machine where you would do your pantographs from, or where if you've got a computerized machine, your computer's on that back side. Underneath there, you can fit these plastic drawer sets that, there's 3 drawers, and I've got a bunch of those stored under there, and that's where I keep my fabric. So I made one drawer that is specifically for my fusibles, whether it's fusible web, fusible fleece, interfacing, fusible interfacing, as well as sew-in interfacing. All of those kind of materials go in one drawer. So as I'm sorting through things, I'm also organizing it at the same time. So that's kind of speeding things up for me a little bit. Go through your embellishments. I had a bunch of lace that I didn't feel like I was going to use, so I donated that. I have a couple packages of seam binding, and I have a use for those. Those make good ties for when I am making roll-ups for crochet hooks or knitting needles or my paintbrushes. They make good ties, and they make good binding, so I kept those kinds of things. I have a large button stash. I organized those and got them out of the glass jars because I didn't want to store things in glass in case they broke. So they are in plastic containers. So I feel safer about storing those in this transition period that I'm going through. Your tools. So all of your sewing tools and your fabric cutting, rotary cutting materials, look at those. I had 3 rotary cutting mats that I lay on my cutting table, and I cut on those. I cut my fabrics on those. They're all old. There was one that I actually stopped using because it wasn't cutting through anymore. It didn't matter how new my blade was. There were so many grooves in it that it just wasn't working anymore. So I tossed that out. I've got one brand new one. I bought a brand new one to replace that one, and I've got 2 others that are getting really close to needing to be replaced. So, I'll be getting rid of those 2 at some point. Look at your rotary cutting blades. If you're like me, I've got an old blade container that holds the round blades, and I use one to put my old blades in. Well, I can toss that. I don't need to hang on to that. It's full anyway, so I'm just going to toss that. Your scissors. Do you have scissors that are worn out and can't be resharpened? I've got 3 pairs of snips that I have used for 15 years, and the last time I got them sharpened, the man who sharpened them, he said, this is the last sharpening you're going to get out of these. He said they're not worth sharpening again. He said you'd be better off just buying a new pair. So when they get to the point where they're not cutting right anymore, which is about now, I just need to replace those. Another item, look at your tape measures, especially your older ones, because after a while they can stretch out of shape and they're no longer accurate on the measurements. So you want to double check those. And if you have some old ones that are brittle, the ones that are made out of vinyl, they get brittle after a while. Toss those. If you've got pins that are dull or bent, go ahead and get rid of those. Put them in medicine bottles, vitamin bottles, or prescription medicine bottles that are empty. Put them in there, screw on the lid. You can glue that lid shut if you want to, if you feel more comfortable with that, and toss those. I had a whole bunch of bent pins that I just hadn't tossed, and so I went ahead and pulled all of those out, and those are going to get tossed. You want to look at your thread stash. I have thread that is really old, and I need to check to make sure it's still strong enough to use. So if you unspool a little bit of it and give it a tug, if it breaks, it's too fragile to use anymore, and you just need to get rid of it. Also, spools that I have just a little bit of thread on it, I'm going to toss those too. So that's another thing I have to do. I have my sewing machine thread and I have my long arm thread. I even have some old hand quilting thread, and I need to go through that and see if that's usable. I haven't hand quilted in 30 years. So, you know, but I still hung on to it thinking, well, I could use it for something. Well, I haven't. So now I need to check and see if it's even worth keeping. That I can donate. So I can donate that to a hand quilter. Okay, another item. Your marking pens. I like to use air-soluble and water-soluble pens, and they dry out, and I eke every drop of ink out of those that I can, and I wind up with several that are just really beyond usefulness, and I need to go through those and get rid of them. I also use dry erase pens for when I am drawing out a design on a quilt top, and I put my vinyl sheet over there and I draw out my design and decide if I like it. Those pens I need to check and see if they are usable anymore either. It's been a couple of months since I used those. It hasn't been that long, but the pens dry out after a while, so I need to look through those and see if I need to get rid of those. Okay, rulers. For rotary cutting, along with your mats, your handles, your rotary cutting handles might get worn out. Maybe they don't work as well as they should. Check those and make sure they're still worth keeping. I have several of those. I have mine and I have my mother-in-law. So we have, between her and I think I've got 8 or 9 rotary cutting handles. So I need to go, especially through hers. I know mine are okay, but I need to go through hers and make sure that they are still working. I did grab one of hers a couple weeks ago and realized that she had the blade on the wrong side. And I don't know how long she had been using it like that, but she was right-handed just as I am, so I'm not sure how in the world she used that with the blade on the wrong side, but she did. So I need to check all of them and make sure, you know, the blades are on the correct side and that they are still working. With your vintage machines, go through all of the supplies that you have with those and make sure all of those items work, whether it's the presser feet, the bobbins. I have machines and they all use a different size bobbin. My current machine, my 7285 patchwork machine, it uses a class 15J. My 1591 uses a class 15. I have machines that use a 99, machines that use a 66, and I have a machine that uses the same bobbin that a featherweight uses. So I have all of these bobbins and I need to go through them, as well as my long arm. Then I have my long arm that uses a class M bobbin. I need to go through those bobbins and make sure they aren't rusty. If they are rusty, I'm just going to toss them out. The metal bobbins. Now the plastic bobbins, I'm going to check and make sure that they aren't broken, they're not cracked or chipped or anything like that, so that, you know, I am not taking things from one place to another that I can't use anyway. So I'm going to go through all of those and check those. While I am checking my machines, I'm also going to give them a good cleaning and a good oiling and pack them up for move. Now I'll do a video on one of the machines on this. That's a good video to do, is to how to pack up your sewing machine for move. I've got some old quilts and I got some old samples. Like I did two small quilts that have border and sashing samples that I quilted on them. And I've already packed up my 1591. I already oiled it and greased it and packed it up. It's still in the cabinet. but I've got one of those quilts wrapped around it, and it's tucked into the machine, and so it's all ready to go. So I'll show you how I do that with one of the other machines when I get around to doing that. Okay, overall, items that you want to keep, think about, just keep what you want to keep. Like my husband told me, just because we're moving doesn't mean you have to get rid of everything. He's not getting rid of any of his stuff. Everything he owns is going with us. So that's all his fishing stuff, and he has got a lot of fishing stuff. He's also a hunter, so all of his hunting supplies, he's a bow hunter as well as a firearms hunter. So, of course I don't expect him to get rid of his equipment, but I figured, some of those lures and stuff that he fishes with, maybe he could get rid of some of those. Well, no, he doesn't want to. So they're going with him. He's an avid reader, and he has a large book collection of his own, and then he's got a lot that were his dad's. All of those are going with him. He's not getting rid of any of those. Now for me, I'm a big reader, but I read from the library, but I do have a good collection of quilting books. Now I went through those, and the older books that I had from years and years ago, I've already done the projects, I've already read them. I'm not seeing anything that is useful in them to me. Those have been boxed up and those have been donated. So I kept the books that I felt were going to be useful to me, and for me that is the more current books, the books on long arm quilting, books on vintage fabrics, how to identify vintage fabrics, and books on just vintage quilts, just things that I'm interested in at the moment. On my fabrics, I already told you about getting rid of the scraps. I have a couple of stacks of fat quarters. I'm keeping those because I have projects planned for those, but I have some fabrics that I kept that I don't have a project in mind for, but I like the fabric, so I'm going to keep it because it's something I may use in the future. So anything that you love or anything that you like, keep it. You don't have to get rid of everything, as my husband said. Let's see. And if you have an item that is difficult to replace, it may be an older item that they're not making anymore and it's something you use, keep that. Now, as far as your other tools, if you have multiples of things and you're only using one of them and you're feeling comfortable enough to donate them, go ahead, because there are especially these acrylic rulers, they're expensive. So if there's a new quilter that and maybe they could use an 8-inch square template, 8.5-inch square template ruler, donate it to them. Maybe you can show them how to use those, what kind of uses they could get out of those. That would be a blessing to them. So I'm not a person that collects a lot of rulers. I have my 6 by 24 inch, and I have 2 of those. I have 6.5 by 10.5, or 6.5 by 12, 13. It's probably 13. It's 6.5 by 13 inch. I have an 8.5-inch square and a 12.5-inch square, and then I have a 5-inch square, and I think the other one's a 3-inch square. That's it as far as fabric cutting rulers. I don't have a lot. Now I have quite a few rulers for long arm quilting, and I have those that I use a lot, and then I have a couple that I don't use very often because I've never got the hang of them. They're kind of the specialty rulers. I have one that's an L shape that is supposed to help you do squares. To me, it wasn't any easier than just using a straight ruler. I have a couple that are supposed to help you do continuous curves. Well, I do my continuous curves freehand. So, those are rulers that I can donate to somebody. So I'll be packing those up and calling a long arm quilter I know and seeing if she would like to have those. So, everybody is going to be different on things that you like, things that you want to keep, things that you want to give away, things you want to trash. Now, as far as packing things up, I normally kept all of my projects in plastic storage bins. So I still have all those bins, and I'm going to utilize those to pack up all of those projects. Now, when I got down to looking at my quilts, going through those, most of those I have stored in plastic bins also. But I started thinking about condensing space, trying to avoid renting 2 or 3 storage units. So if we move into a place, we don't have a rental place yet, but if we move into a place that doesn't have a lot of space, I'm going to need some space saving devices. So I went ahead and I bought a bunch of vacuum storage bags, and I'm running a test at this point. I've got 8 or 9 of those in use right now, and I packed the quilts in them, and I did the vacuum seal on it, so they're all compressed. Now that it takes up a lot less space, but they would not fit back into my storage bins, and that was what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to compress them and just use my storage bins and just put more items in the storage bins. That didn't work. Because when you compress them, they don't just compress down, they also compress out. So they didn't quite fit. And I probably just need smaller bags. I bought the jumbo bags because that's what was recommended for comforters. And I was thinking, well, quilts and comforters, my larger quilts would be comforter size. Maybe I can use that. It didn't quite work. So I may buy some smaller bags and see if I can put them in the bins. But they're in those bags now. They're dust free. They're sealed so air can't get to them, so they won't mildew, and it'll keep the moisture out. So they're okay. But I did decide that I was not going to put my art quilts in those, because when they're compressed, it's squishing. It's squishing. It's compressing them, and my art quilts are made with things like there's not sequins, crystals on some of them. Some of them are painted. I don't want the paint to crack or break or anything like that. Some of them have other embellishments on them that I'm concerned about. I'm also not certain about my quilts that are made with fusible web. I've decided probably I'm not going to put those in the vacuum storage containers, bags. I don't know if that would be an issue or not, but I don't know how long they're going to be in storage like that. As I'm going through items, I am packing them up to store. So one thing besides the storage bins, I went and bought some round sticky dots, and I labeled everything. So I've got a code set up as far as what is in the boxes, and I'm keeping a list of what's in each box. So each box gets a letter and a number, and then with that letter and number, I write down what's in it. So I know what quilt is in what box. I know what fabric is in what box, or what tools are in each box. Like all of the vintage sewing machine parts and tools that I have, they're in 2 different containers, and they're in a plastic container, and they're small. They're not large ones because I don't have a lot of that. And I've got a queue down there for quilting, because everything's coming from that's my quilting studio area. So it's queue for quilting, and then each one gets a consecutive number, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to, I think I'm up to like 114 or 115 at this point. Because I have a lot of things that are in small boxes. I'm not talking about big boxes. Some of them are shoebox size. And then I've got a notebook that I have listed everything in there, and then I've also put it in my computer on a spreadsheet. So if I lose my notebook, it's in my computer, and as we're moving, my computer won't be set up. I'll have the notebook, so I'll know where everything's at. You can color code those too if you want to, but the sticky dots that I found only came in 3 colors, and the way I was going to code things, was by like per room in the house, like the kitchen, the living room, the dining room, and then the bedrooms, my office, my husband's office, and the basement. That's more than 3, so the colors aren't going to matter. You can also buy just white labels and label things. Now, anything that I put in a cardboard box, I also wrote on it what was in there, as far as whether it goes in the kitchen or the dining room, or if it goes in the living room or one of the bedrooms, it's on there. So you can come up with all different kinds of systems for packing your house up. You can hire somebody to do it for you, which when we make the move, we will do that. But at this point, I want to declutter to the point where the house is showable on the real estate market. And right now, there's too much stuff. It's just cluttered. So we'll get through that and get all that in storage, and I'll know where everything is, and then we can move on from there. Anyway, if you are just decluttering your area, your sewing area, or if you're making a move from one room to another, or you're like me and you're doing a big move, you're going to move twice, I hope you found some tips in here that might help you. So in the meantime, I will keep you updated. I will try to make a video on how I am storing my sewing machines, getting them ready for a move. I might even show you a breakdown of the long arm machine when I get to that point. Right now, I'm still using the long arm. I'm going to use that probably till the very last day that I can to get some of the projects done. My sewing machine as well, the current one that I'm using most, I'm going to keep that one up, and just try and keep as much work going, as much flow going as I can, until we get to the point where we need to move everything out of the house, and then there'll probably be a lull, but I will keep you updated as to how this goes. I'll do some video of the house building too, in case you're interested in that, and especially when the house is built and I'm setting up my new sewing space. So I'll let you see what that is like, and I'm looking forward to that point, which is still going to be several months away, but I am looking forward to that. Hopefully I'll no longer be in a basement. Like right now I am in my upstairs office, which is just a spare room. I got my desk and computer with a printer. I've got a fish tank, and I have my easel, which is over there for painting, and I've got a bookcase, and that's all that's in here. So I used to have, right back here behind me was a set of bunk beds right up against the wall. But there used to be a set of bunk beds in here, so the room was really crowded. But right now it's nice, it's open. I still have a little bit of work to do in here, but it's almost ready to be used as, it's almost ready for showing. So we just need to get the rest of the house in that shape. But anyway, it takes time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links, and to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.